Hey, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining on us. Thank you for joining us on this early Friday morning. Hope you like the smooth jazz just to get us going for the day. My name is Ruben Amaya. I am honored to serve as the president of the Young Democrats of Maryland. And I want to thank County Executive Stuart Pittman for joining us today for a conversation. If you don't know already, next Saturday, the Maryland Democratic Party will be electing um, a chair to lead our party. And their really main responsibility is, of course, not just helping us elect Democrats, but really setting the tone and message for the direction we want our party to go. And so, obviously that those are big shoes to fill. And so we really thank Mr. Pittman for joining us to just have a conversation. As we know, young people are really taking a big step in leading that effort and making sure that we not only help elect Democrats, but making sure we move our party in a direction that's beneficial for our collective future. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it to you, sir, if you just want to introduce yourself and share why you're running.
Yeah, thanks, Ruben. And hello, Calandra. Think I saw some of the others of you last night at the gala, and I just first want to say that if you compare that gala to the ones before, um, this one was livelier. I think there's some things going on in the party that have been spiced up, and it seemed a little less the stodgy old. I should never say anything bad about an elected official, but you have the lineup of the members of Congress, and for a while there, it was a bunch of old white guys. And I remember when I got elected, I was on the stage with them all, thinking, "Jesus, how did I get myself in with this group?" And I'm just like them. But things have evolved, and it was amazing to see a lot of video of protests and things that are going on around the state. And it signals to me that there's a change going on, that's already going on in the Maryland Democratic Party, but also in the public. So yeah, I am the county executive of Anne Arundel County. I was elected in 18. Everybody said we were a red county. It turned out we were actually a purple county. The guy that I ran against had beat the Democratic person 4 years earlier by 22 points, and so there wasn't a Democrat in the county willing to run for the seat. He had all the money. He was invincible, supposedly, and I had been thinking about running for office because I had a history as a community organizer for a decade and thought about politics from an organizing perspective. And Donald Trump had gotten elected. This was 17 when I made the decision that I should engage. I'd been, running nonprofits. I'd been doing working on the farm, farming, growing hay, training horses, and then created a nonprofit, the Retired Racehorse Project. And and um, and I had a sense that I would come back full circle to social justice work at some point in my life. And it seemed like the moment after Trump got elected. Um, and so I thought about running for county council in the red district where I live in the southern part of the rural part of the county. And and it was actually Congresswoman Elfreth now. At that time, she was just Sarah Elfter. She hadn't been elected yet to Senate, and said, "Have you thought about running for county executive? The numbers are better than they look for council, and you seem like a smart enough guy, and we need a sacrificial lamb to go in there and run up the numbers." And so I thought about it for a couple of months and came to the conclusion that, yeah, there was a coalition in this county that could be built. And the beginning of the coalition was actually the movement against the women's march groups, multiple groups in our county, and they're the first ones that I met with. But then there was labor, and there were public employees, and there was environmental advocates, and there was the Caucus of African American Leaders in NAACP who had been really dissed by the county executive, and there was Casa Maryland actually engaged really heavily in my race, and so the coalition was there. It just hadn't been brought together, and we did that, and we won by 4.7 points, and then we governed for 4 years, not like a Republican, leaning in to the values. I remember the first thing I did was get rid of 287G program that our jail was doing with ICE. And then ICE responded by shutting down our ICE detention center, which I had made a decision to keep open because I visited the people who were detained there and some of the people who were providing services from the outside, some of the pastors, and they said, don't shut this place down. It's the only humane ICE detention center in Maryland, and it's close to where the hearings are in Baltimore. So I said, okay, we're going to keep it open. We're going to take the money that we make from ICE and we're going to invest it in legal services for people who are going to their hearings, and that pissed off ICE in DC enough that they immediately shut down our ICE detention center, and then they became illegal in the state of Maryland. But so we leaned into that. We leaned into housing. We've leaned into a lot of equity work and telling of history, in particular in Anne Arundel County, of which there's a lot of history of racism and institutional racism with county government. We have done a lot of environmental work and kept that coalition together at the same time that we've gotten people on board for building more affordable housing, which is probably the thing I'm most proud of is finding a path to do affordable housing in a county that was ruled by NIMBYs. And the NIMBYs have actually evolved and become much more supportive of that work. Um, and then the other thing that we did was, I feel like in any jurisdiction that you have to be fiscally responsible with people's money. And so yeah, we raised taxes and then we created the progressive income. Well, we raised them a bit, property and income the first year because we had to because we were so underfunded. And then my big priority in the General Assembly from day one was we got to make income taxes progressive for counties the way they used to be. They're not a piggyback on the state progressivity or the federal progressivity. They're flat in all counties. So we finally got a bill passed that allows counties to do that. Frederick and Anne Arundel, the only ones who've implemented it so far. We weren't capped it, so we were able to raise them up to the cap for the highest income earners. Um, and all of those things seem to, I seem to get away with it. And then we got reelected by 7.7% in the next election, again by a person who had more money than I did. She came in with a ton of money. Her husband was the chair of the Republican Party of Maryland, Jessica Hare, and really well connected to money. And won pretty handily. So the second term has been wonderful because I don't have the political pressures of running for office. I'm term limited. We've been able to continue the hard work, and I feel like we're in a really good place. So that I think the next county executive is likely to be a Democrat. I think the county council is very likely to stay majority Democrat. We flipped it in 18. And so I feel good about what we've done. But I always said that the most impactful thing I could do is to change the body politic, change the way people think, the way they feel about government in particular, but community even more. And so I like to think that we've made some progress in Anne Arundel County on that front. And so here I am with a year and a half left to go. And, once again, even more so, we're under attack. It's a two-party system. The other party wants to kill us, literally. And the most important thing, in my view, that we can do is build the other party, the Democratic Party, and make it the resistance, make it the 365-day a year, every year organization that isn't just there to elect politicians. We got a branding problem with that it's just no, people don't like politicians and they don't like government. They don't like, don't like, and parties are part of that. And but I am convinced that in this moment, there's this incredible opportunity. And again, it's thinking like an organizer. And I was a real organizer. I mean, I started out in the south side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago. We did neighborhood group organizing in Acorn. I don't know how many of you know the history of Acorn, but it doesn't exist anymore. We were at about 26 offices at the time I was there, and really mobilized people in low and moderate income neighborhoods to go after City Hall. And then we worked at the national level as well. I then went to Iowa. We had endorsed Jesse Jackson, and here I was in these white working class neighborhoods, but we also had African American, Latino neighborhoods in Des Moines, Iowa, anyway, and building for the caucuses, and then I came back home and worked for the National Low Income Housing Coalition, building state housing coalitions, and then went back to Acorn because I felt like Acorn was the only one that was really doing the grassroots organizing of the inside the Beltway organizations that were there in Washington that were not really, to me, doing real organizing work. And so I went back to Acorn and was director of national campaigns. And so I would sort of advise the local organizations and go around the country and meet with them about how to, where are the levers of power? How can you build the organization through winning campaigns? And how can you grow power at the local level? And then I was also involved in the work going after the banking industry and the insurance industry for redlining, and some of the national level campaigns. So lo and behold, here I am thinking about what I'm going to do next in my life, as I get to the end of our 8 years, knowing that my staff wants me to do less because we're trying to finish what we started, and we shouldn't be starting all these new having these new ideas and starting new things towards the end. Just leave us alone and get our work done. Um, and Ken Allman comes along and says he's stepping down and that he had talked to the governor and Dr. Dukes, and that they really thought that I was the perfect person to do this. And I think part of the reason for that from the governor was that, I got to know, I hadn't met him until he decided to run. I met him very, very early in the campaign, and then I endorsed him. I think I was the second person to endorse him of an elected, but the first county leader, and then really engaged in the campaign, and and um, and I saw something in him that, um, I think we need. And I've watched him incredibly closely, and I believe that, when he says leave no one behind, that's a pretty radical thing to say. But then when he says that's what I learned in the army, suddenly it seems less radical. Actually, I think that the military is the closest thing we have to a socialist organization in this country. They take care of their people, and they stick together in ways that I think I admire because of that. They have health insurance, their family, they have housing for their people. It's pretty amazing how well they take care of their people. And so, um, I feel as though Westmore is something special that we absolutely have to make sure he wins the next election by a whole lot. I relish the idea of chasing Larry Hogan out of the race, maybe scaring him out of the race by telling the history of what he did with those low-income housing tax credits and those developers that were trying to build housing who had to write checks to his brother in order to get higher ranking in the process. And that's an amazing story that came out in October, in the race against Angela Alsobrooks, that should scare him out of the race. But if he gets in, I also would love to beat him by a whole lot. Um, and I also feel like Maryland Scott, people around the country are looking at us and looking at Jamie Raskin and Chris Van Hollen and what he's done, and Angela Also Brooks and Wes Moore, and they're saying, what is in the water in Maryland that y'all produce such amazing people? You must be great at this or something, because we're actually, a very diverse state. And it wouldn't necessarily, it's not automatic that we be, so democratic. So I feel like we have to live up to that, and really deliver, and show the rest of the country a good way forward. Um, so I said yes. I said yes because I just felt like it was the most important work, and that, I've been asked a lot, how can you do both jobs? It's a full-time job being party chair. And part of it is that I know for Ken, it was not a full-time job. He worked his ass off, no question about that, but he was also running his business. And it has not always been a full-time, and in other states, they always have an elected official as chair. So it varies. But what makes it possible for me, I think, is that in addition to having an amazing team in the county executive's office, um, that the staff at the party, if you look at other cycles, at this point in the cycle, usually it's decimated and they're trying to rebuild. It's really strong right now, with Karen and Joe and Justin and Aaron, and they've just got some really, really great people who know what they're doing. They have a plan, they have goals, and they're working towards them. And I look at what those are, and I'm impressed by it. Um, so, I can't, when I'm not the chair yet, say what I would do, make promises about what I would do, because there's a whole decision-making process in the party. I can tell you two things. One, first of all, I do respect that the party is structured, the bylaws of the party is structured so that the central committees, have the power. They elect the chair. It's a little awkward being nominated by the governor and supported by the current chair and the current vice chair, and sort of being like the chosen one. and it happened on a pretty short timeline, 30 days, but and I think that was because Ken finally made the decision he needed to step down and he really wanted to make it happen pretty quickly. Um, and so that's a little awkward and because I think it is the decision, no question, it is the decision of the Central Committee members from around the state. So the way I've handled that is tried to connect with as many people as I can. I've done a lot of these Zoom meetings with counties, gotten out and about as much as I have been able to some counties. And what I'm learning is that there are particularly, I will say, I mean, I think all counties have amazing people that are doing the hard work on the ground. But in the red counties, being a Democrat and doing that work is you've got to be a little braver. And I've um, I've always been really believed that there's an opportunity in rural areas to bring people back into the Democratic Party, and now is the moment because of how hurt they're going to be by the tariffs, by the Medicaid cuts, by closures of clinics and hospitals, by you name it. They're going to be hurt, decimated. We're all going to be decimated if all of the things in the big shitty bill come to pass. And even if half of them don't, we'll be in bad shape. So now's the time where we can open our arms and welcome people back into the Democratic Party, who many of whom were there before, and really, really, really grow. And there are people in each central committee that are already working on it and doing the deep canvassing and doing integrating with some service-based organizations in their counties that to create allies and then stepping up and actually running for positions where everybody says you can't win. I absolutely want to engage fully in those jurisdictions, but then I know that the larger counties they all have completely different concerns, but that ultimately the central committees have to be strong or the party's not growing. So that I know, and that is a commitment that I will do everything I can to make it grow. And really, my goal is just to grow the party and make people want to be connected to it, because it is the organization that is protecting us from the assaults that are coming from Washington. So I'll stop with that. And I know I talked too long, but have that tendency when I get excited, but um,
All good.
ask questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So I'll turn it to our Executive Vice President, Calandra Young, and the chair of our Youth Jewish Caucus, Jared Shabline, who will help moderate. So I'll throw it to them to ask the first two questions, and then we'll throw it to the group if they have any questions from there.
Thanks.
Good morning, County Executive Pittman. How are you?
I'm good, Jared. I just replied to your email. Thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah, I just saw that. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Real quick before we ask the first question, for those of us who are joining us, if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand so we know to call on you. You can do that by hitting the react button on your screen, and then there will be a raise hand button. With that said, the first question is how, with so many young people registering as unaffiliated across our state and really across our country, how do you think the Democratic Party can do better at reaching out to young people and encouraging them and saying, yes, the Democratic Party is the home for you, for the change you want to see?
So, I mean, I think part of it is the message of what we're trying to do. And to me, the overarching message is economic justice. And it kind of always has been, but it's not always been all that clear. But I think that young people obviously are concerned about how it is that they're going to be able to um, get a car, have a place to live, have a career, maybe even a family if that's what they're into. How are they going to afford a life? And so I think that's an appeal to young people. It's appeal to everybody, economic justice, but particularly to young people. But then the way that you do it and the way that you do the messaging and find people where they're at is, I think it's obviously changing, it's evolving, and we can't be the Democratic Party of our parents. We've got to be on all the platforms, and we've got to do it in a way that is, connects to people in their cultures and people into their way of lives. And I actually think that, Joe's not that young. Sorry, Joe, but I think you're on here somewhere. Yeah, there you are. But when he wears his hoodie and burn the talking points, and he has his way of doing it, it's you know it's progress. It's appealing to younger people, I think. Um, and I think the other thing is just inviting and being open to, and obviously having candidates that are young, that are running and that are leading the party. So it's an affinity group like many others. So um, um, I don't have anything new. I'm an old guy who's not, I'm not a young person, which is why young people have to be at the table.
Thank you so much for that answer. I appreciate it. Um, Hope you got the chance to have your 2 cups of coffee this morning, like you said.
Yes, I did.
The next question I will ask is, how will you ensure transparency and communication within the party?
So I think communication breaks down when there are tough issues that people don't want to talk about because they're controversial. And there may be times where you don't walk in, um, you don't want to fan the flames. And there's controversies within every central committee and within the party everywhere. And there always has been, and there always will be. Um, I think um, if people trust one another, then it's easier to have those conversations. And I think what that is one of the things as a party leader that I get to have a lot of influence over. So literally walking into a central committee where there's conflict and listening and, possibly playing a role in solving what those issues are. I mean, there may not be really easy issues, but sometimes people need to be heard. Always people need to be heard. So being brave enough to 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 have the conversations. Um, and I will say that within the Democratic Party, and this is probably true everywhere, you have this top-down dynamic, and the top being the top electeds, the higher you go. And then you have the bottom up, which is the way it's structured with the central committees and all of the work that they do. And I think we have to be honest about the fact that both directions are important. And
Mhm.
and I think I come from, I guess you would say, the left, certainly the more populist wing. I sort of, I'm not afraid of populism, and I'm not afraid of shaking things up a little bit. But uh, the willingness to just to have the conversations about the hard topics, I think, is important. I will also, I know that the party has added to its communications channels, and there's a ton of stuff coming out, and that is communication too. It actually absolutely has to be. Um, and I don't think we can do too much of that, and we just have to have really good people. And I think there are really good staff in the party now, will continue to improve on all of those channels. I mean, I've been looking around the country. The DFL in Minnesota, Democratic Farm Labor Party, they call themselves, is pretty damn strong. They've had the same leader for 14 years, who's now Ken Martin, who's a chair in the DNC. But I went to their site, and they literally have a daily war room 7 to 9 minute video thing that you can zoom into. I mean, it's just like everyday constant communication with everybody online. And that to me is a good thing. So we'll see what we
Thank you.
yeah.
We're going to open it up for questions on the floor. We see Michael DeLong with his hand up. If he could be unmuted.
Uh, Thank you. Michael DeLong here from Montgomery County Democrats. Mr. Pittman, thanks for being here today. Following up on a couple of your earlier conversations, you mentioned that you were not afraid of populism, and I wanted to talk about something very briefly. A few months ago, Delegate David Moon gave a good town hall with us, and he mentioned that the Democrats had kind of been come to think of it, be thought of as like the bougie party, and he didn't mean that entirely as a compliment, although we want people from many different backgrounds. So I guess my question is, what will you do to try and sort of correct that assumption, to try and make it so the Democratic Party is like it's a place fights for working class people, for economic justice, for people of all like backgrounds and educational backgrounds and other such things?
Yeah, I think obviously that's a theme in the country right now, as people try to struggle with figure out why we lost the presidential election. And clearly the policies are serving working people, but the message isn't getting across in there. And they go to people like Donald Trump. Um, so I think a lot of it does have to do with how you have the conversations, the words that we use. And I can't tell people how to talk about things, but at least in my communications, I try not to get too wonky, and to keep myself from doing that. I mean, I'm a college educated bougie dude. I didn't go to graduate school, but I did spend a lot of time on the farm, and I am a member of the Farm Bureau board, or I was on the board of Farm Bureau, and sitting around with a bunch of Trump voting farmers, meeting after meeting, and people who I would trust my life with. They'll lend me their tractor, they'll come when they're, in bad weather, and I mean, they help each other as a community. So I don't think of them as bad people. I think of them as like they're certainly, in my view, misguided on policy, um, but I find myself communicating to them in almost, I mean, I actually have like this twang that comes out and I can't stop myself, um, and use different words. And it's just a natural thing that happens because I've spent so much time with them. And I think there are leaders at the national level who can sort of talk every man's talk, every woman's talk, every person. Just keep it real. So I think it is a communication way partly, and um, and I think being there more and being present, for the party, the Democratic Party, is one way of doing that. I mean, I'll guarantee you that the fact that I go to the Farm Bureau picnic and I just sit there and talk to people, they really appreciate not just going and giving a speech, but actually sort of being there. And for the party, I think there's opportunities to do that. We're well staffed, we have good people, and and at the local level as well, just being present and connecting to people first as humans, and then talking policy. So um, and then in terms of policy, I think a lot of what we've done, I mean, if you just look at the Build Back Better bill that didn't pass and what that would have done for working people, it's great stuff. And there's a lot of other great stuff that can be done in terms of policy. And sometimes that does mean going up against some of our big donors and the corporate interests that fund campaigns, and go against their interests and maybe raise some of their taxes so that we can pay for stuff for working people. Um, and that's some of the populism too. But messaging and the way we talk is important.
Our next question is from O'Mary Barnes. If you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Course. Hello. My question is really about the conversation that I heard about young people and getting involved. As a young person myself, I'm 17 years old, VP of membership in Prince George's County Young Dems. What I see in my community and in the circles I'm involved in with other youth, with my peers, is this sense of impatience, this sense of what is the bureaucracy going to do for me? Um, and it's a really important question. And they're just, they're exhausted by the slow pace. And sometimes this is just perception, but they perceive the bureaucracy is moving very, very slowly. Nothing's getting done. And they have this impatience. They want to see immediate action. So, how do you, number one, articulate what the Democratic Party is doing? Number one. Number two, how do you explain the rights of the minority, and that's why it takes so much time to get things done? So how do you explain that? And number three, while also pushing forward democratic initiatives and advancing the party's interest. So it's a little bit of a three-pronged question.
So yeah, I love the way the way you're putting all of that, because there is another one of the movements and sort of the assessments about what Democrats have done wrong is that we've created bureaucracy that is so dense and thick that you can't get anything done. And whether you're trying to build housing and it's regulations that are, that make it slow, or whether you're trying to do, research and create a vaccine or what. So I don't know how many of you have, sort of followed some of that in their books that come out, the abundance, politics of abundance. And growth. And I know the governor he's sort of been almost before the books were written, he was talking about growth as being a solution to a lot of our problems, as long as we leave no one behind. But you're right. It's like in everything that we do, it's slow. The bureaucracy sucks. I mean, that's sort of the attitude. So I think for Democrats, it's acknowledging that, yeah, in our desire to solve all problems, these college educated policy wonks, yeah, we put too much damn regulation on everything. We put regulation on top of regulation on it. Every member of a legislative body wants to show their value by passing a bill, even if the bill, is to solve one constituent's problem, and then it's a regulation that applies to everybody. So, and I find that in Anne Arundel County, I get a lot of cred when I talk about this, and when then I actually do things to deregulate. And as long as you're not hurting people when you deregulate, you're just simplifying. I think we have an answer to that, and we can do actual policy things to reduce the regulations to make things move faster. Now, there are some people who will say that one of those regulations that slows everything and that messes everything up is DEI, and that we got to stop that in its tracks. And the answer to that is no. Wait a minute. We're talking about making government efficient. We got to make sure that every group of people is being served what is actually going to maximize their value to the enterprise, and so that all voices have to be at the table, and we have to be inclusive and engaged, just like a sports coach would with a team, right? I mean, you gotta make sure that if this person over here needs to work on their speed and do sprints, they do that because that's where they are, and this person over here has some other need that they need to do to become a better player. And in our society, if we're not acknowledging our diversity and trying to achieve equity by being inclusive and working with every group on what it is that it takes to create opportunity for them, then we as an enterprise are going to fail. A lot of these issues can be bogged down in conversations about, like, all of the regulations that we've created. Our tax code, it's too complicated, and da 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 da. Well, it's full of loopholes that billionaires use to pay no taxes, while the rest of us are paying the maximum. We don't get any loopholes. Let's just put the taxes back on the top earners like they were 20, 30, 40, well, no, more like 40 to 80 years ago, when they were paying more than 50% in their income tax, and we could actually solve our economic problems. Throwing that good old populism and that plain talk and slicing through the bureaucratic BS, I think is exactly what people are looking for. It's exactly why people are impatient. And I think as politicians and as party, we also have to be impatient, which is why I'm so glad that people are hitting the streets with signs and like having an outlet to basically express their impatience. And I'm really glad that the party is engaging in that movement on the streets. And I want to continue that in Maryland as much as we can.
Delegate Warman, I see your hand is up if you want to ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ruben. And thank you, County Executive Pittman, for, considering stepping into this role. I know it's not a glamorous job. My question is about school board races. We know those are technically nonpartisan, but in practice, they're basically ground zero for some really extreme coordinated campaigns from groups like Mom for Liberty and worse. And these candidates are just walking into hard fights and often with little infrastructure or support. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what role the state party can and should play going forward? I know this past cycle, the party delved a little bit more into helping these races, but I just want to hear your thoughts on that going forward.
Yeah. So in Anne Arundel County, we had on our school board, we had a couple of pretty bad people. One was a operative for the Republican Party, and she'd gotten affiliated with Moms for Liberty. And then we had candidates that were Moms for Liberty candidates, and in particular, there was this guy Chuck Yoakum who was literally dangerous. I mean, he had been a teacher and he had been not convicted, but it was pretty clear that he was not allowed in the classroom anymore for molesting children. And so an independent ran in the reddest district in Anne Arundel County to keep him out of office. I think she got in there maybe about the same time as him. Anyway, she ran as an independent because that was running as a Democrat would probably hurt her in that election, nonpartisan election. It was nonpartisan, so she didn't have to even claim it, but she registered as an independent so that she wouldn't be tagged as Democrat. And our local electeds, our central committee wanted to support her as well as support another candidate in South County, and went to the state party and said, can you engage? And the answer was yes, and everybody was so excited about that the Democratic Party was engaging in multiple school board races. And I think the argument for it was, look, they're organized at the national level with Moms for Liberty. We have to be organized, and whether or not somebody's running as a Democrat it should not prevent that from happening. And I know that similar things have happened in municipal races in small towns, and in the small towns, it's like that's how we're breaking into the the red, all red local electeds through those city races. So I think it's really important that the party continue to play in school board and small municipal races. Just like all the central committee members are elected. It's a more grassroots level of electoral politics that we both build a bench with. And at the local level is how you get people out, how you build the brand of the party and make it close to people so it's a friendly institution, the Democratic Party.
Thank you so much. We are going to move to what looks like our last question from Ian Miller. Oh, we have one more after Ian.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. This has been great, and thanks for putting it on. I guess my question's about like democratic reforms within the party. So for one, kind of like what's your position as far as are you in favor of special elections? Are you in favor of continuing the appointment process through the central committee? But also, secondly, I really appreciate you mentioning the importance of like the democratic process here and that this is an election. And in terms of that election, we have like a really convoluted voting system within the Maryland Democratic Party where essentially like votes from Prince George's County and Montgomery County are worth 8 or 9 votes themselves, where a vote from Allegheny County is worth, I think, like 0.7. So when it comes to empowering kind of like our rural and important voices within the party, there's not a whole lot of incentive to drive out over 3 hours from Western Maryland or from parts of the Eastern Shore, and that somebody can pretty much win this election with Anne Arundel County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Howard County. So I'm also curious if you would consider looking at reforming that system, and kind of empowering our rural jurisdictions.
Yeah. So I didn't even know how it worked until I got into this and I looked at it, and it was pretty complicated with the weighting system. And I can see how it came about, which is that, trying to reflect the numbers of Democrats, and that every Democrat should have, equal weight. And I can also see how it disincentivizes participation from places that don't have a lot of Democrats, or don't have a lot of people even. So I mean, I think we should always be open to looking at improving systems like that and making it more reflective of whatever our goals are. And I think what you're proposing is that it not be weighted by numbers of Democrats, or that we at least add some weight to the need to have engagement from areas where we're not strong. Um, so, and I think there are a lot of other ways of strengthening areas that are not strong too, because especially now, I think that it's the best political play anyway, is to get that slice of rural voters and get voters who haven't been engaged. Um, so the question of special elections versus appointments from central committees. I was talking to some folks from Prince George's County about this last night, and you know, I think this is a back and forth thing that's been going on, that and, uh, special elections, one, they take a lot of time, they're expensive, um, but they allow the voters to make, to elect. So, in theory, that's more democratic. It's really hard to pull off in a lot of cases. The process the central committees have used, to appoint people to these offices and then have them confirmed by the governor. Um, I've actually been impressed, even when it's been ugly. In Anne Arundel County, we've had some really difficult ones recently where the central committee was divided right down the middle, and people were really passionate on both sides. And and I sat there and I watched the interviews, and my takeaway was different than most people. I just like contacted them and went on social media and said, how impressed I was by the fact that these folks who don't even get paid, who are elected, and they step up and they serve, um, manage to keep their composure, be professional, and have a really thorough interview process that was incredibly transparent. It was live streamed and all that. Um, and then they made a decision. And thank you for doing it, because now we've got these seats filled, and we've got them filled with people who their values are consistent with the Democratic Party. They were interviewed by the Democratic Party Central Committee. I was really impressed in all the cases that we've done. And not everybody agrees with me, and it's usually the people whose candidate didn't win that disagree. And I've seen the people who've been appointed to these seats, and then they run later. What I can say is that they tend to reflect the values of the Central Committee, and I think that's fine, because the Central Committee is elected. So um, I kind of think it's a good process, but maybe we need to be a little bit more helpful in creating consistency from county to county, and really helping the central committees that find themselves in trouble, um, and um, and help to guide them.
Awesome, thank you. I know.
But thanks, Ian. I've read your stuff on Facebook, and I hear you. This election, yeah.
Yeah, I know we're supposed to go till 9:45. I see two more hands. Not sure what your timeline is like. If you got time for two, or
Yeah, I've got time for two. Yeah, I just have to be off by 10. Yep.
okay, cool. All right, James, if you want to go on.
Good morning. Thank you for stepping up to this position. Um, so in the aftermath of last year's election, a lot has been made about how the Dem Democratic Party isn't reaching a lot of voters in, say, what are called media deserts. Um, I was wondering if you had any ideas how to reach these voters in places where, say, they aren't hearing our message and are only hearing the Republican message. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it, because we haven't really talked about this. So yeah, there are media deserts and then there are places where the media has been taken over by the far right, like Anne Arundel County, the Capital Gazette, Baltimore Sun, now owned by um, um, Sinclair, and same people own Fox 45, which a lot of people watch. And it's amazing how the news, even the local news, has changed um, and become more right wing. And then there are the places where there's no local, more and more places in the country really where there is no local paper, or there might be a little teeny one that very few people read, which is how the Capital Gazette has become. Um, and so the way, as a county executive, one of the things that I've recognized is that county government, we have to tell our own story. We have to do much more in terms of communications. I write these weekly letters that have a pretty broad readership, um, and so that I can speak directly to people about what I think is important that week. And our and then there are a lot of other things that we put out that are newsy. Um, so I think that the Democratic Party can never do too much, but we have to. I mean, I would like to see there has to be a balance when you're an organization that needs to raise money for survival, especially the Democratic Party, who's trying to create a small donor base, so it's not totally dependent on, larger donors. So that's got to be done digitally, and there's a lot of online asks for money, just like with candidates. However, we also have to be putting out a lot of stuff that is interesting to read or to watch or to listen to, and builds an audience. And so, like the Burn the Talking Points, podcast is an attempt at that that's fairly new, and I hope it grows its audience. But we have to keep doing things like that, I think, and that means investing in communications and so, political parties used to have their own newspapers, and they were the newspapers at various points in history. And so I think we should be open to getting really ambitious and really creative about telling the story. And then when we do it, we have to do it in a way um, that people like and invites people in, maybe who don't completely agree with us. Otherwise, we're only talking to our own, solid base. Um, so the comm strategy to the party is really important, and it has to be not just in the major media markets. It has to, and sometimes it's going to have to be targeted and tailored to counties so that we work with. And this gets really, now we're talking about a whole lot of work. So, Karen and Joe are probably freaking out right now as I say this, but wouldn't it be nice if we could really, work with every county, every central committee, on their comms, and making sure that both, we're doing a consistent message, but that we're really helping them grow in their little media desert. But it's a whole new world on that because of the changes that basically the loss of local media.
And sorry, Kelly.
No, no problem. So we will go ahead and move to our last question from John.
Thank you. Hi, County Executive Pittman. My name's John Sanick, Vice Chair of the Baltimore County Central Committee. My question is based on the last year or so, but also just in general, seeing some Democratic representatives in Congress as well as other levels of government take votes that to many in the party or to the party in general sometimes do not reflect our values, such as like voting for the Lake and Riley Act, or more recently voting for a resolution to praise what ICE is doing in our communities. Basically, my question is, what will your approach be from the state party, as well as just what the conversation can be from local parties and local central committee members as to what can be done from the parties in terms of criticizing or reacting when our Democratic representatives make votes that don't necessarily reflect our values?
So I don't see, I mean, yeah, there are going to be votes, and there will continue to be votes, and there have always been votes that some Democrats take, that are elected in Congress or in any legislative body, that make some of us cringe. and I don't. I mean, sometimes it's hard to second guess people for why they do these things. Sometimes it's because they're trying to appeal to a constituency that they think that they need to be able to win the next election and keep the Republican from taking over. That's often the case. You know, there are lots of reasons for why a vote might be taken by a Democrat that doesn't seem consistent with the values of other Democrats. My own view is that spending our time, and certainly the party's time, criticizing from that is taking away from the time that we could spend growing the party and adding more people to it. I think as a party, unless somebody were to do something completely switching sides kind of a thing, I don't see myself as party chair criticizing our members of Congress or other electeds around the state for taking some votes that are cringeworthy. I think there are enough people in the base that can hold them accountable without the party doing it. And we have enough work to do that we could get sucked into that quickly, and I think we have to be the unifier.
Well, thank you so much. I know you don't have much more time, so I will go ahead and close us out. Thank you again, County Executive Pittman, for joining us today, for offering your vision as a candidate for the Maryland Democratic Party. We appreciate you taking the time to connect with us directly, with members and all of the grassroots leaders, because these type of conversations, they truly matter. To everyone who joined us today, thank you for being here. This is how we are able to build a stronger and more inclusive, action-driven party. The energy and the ideas that were shared today are a reminder of the change that starts with all of us that are here. And for those of you who want to get more involved, feel free to visit us at YDM, ydmaryland.org. You can sign up for our newsletter. You could become a member. You could join one of our statewide committees. We'd love to have you all in the room. And yes, just stay connected with us on Instagram, Facebook at Young Democrats of Maryland for updates and events, opportunities so that we can find different ways to make an impact. Thank you again, and I'll see all of you soon.
Have a good one, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.